Hello, esteemed gentlemen. The strongest transformation begins the moment you stop asking the world who you should be. There comes a point in a man's life when being constantly available starts to feel more like a burden than a privilege. While everyone else is chasing invitations, attention, and endless notifications, the Sigma male does something that confuses almost everyone. He quietly disappears. Not because he has given up, not because he is lonely, and certainly not because he hates people. He leaves because he has discovered something most people never do. Sometimes the fastest way to move forward is to step away from the noise. Here's an interesting fact. Psychologists have found that periods of intentional solitude can improve creativity, sharpen decision-making, and increase self-awareness. In other words, stepping back isn't always a retreat. It can be the most powerful reset button a person has. And let's be honest, sometimes monk mode is also a vacation. From people who text, "Can I ask you a favor?" before they even say hello. But don't mistake monk mode for hiding. For the Sigma male, it's a deliberate season of rebuilding. It's where distractions are replaced with discipline, validation is replaced with purpose, and comfort is replaced with growth. While the outside world assumes nothing is happening, an invisible transformation is taking place behind closed doors. So why does a Sigma male suddenly vanish from the social scene? What pushes him to trade attention for silence, parties for purpose, and constant connection for complete isolation? The answers are far deeper and far more surprising than most people realize. By the end of this video, you'll understand why monk mode isn't an escape from life. It's often where a Sigma begins to master it. Number 1, they get tired of performing their personality. One of the biggest reasons a Sigma male enters monk mode is because he gets exhausted from performing a version of himself that keeps everyone else comfortable. It doesn't happen overnight. At first, he laughs at jokes he doesn't find funny, agrees with opinions he doesn't completely believe, and stays in conversations he has mentally left hours earlier. Not because he's fake, but because that's often how people are expected to fit in. Over time, something starts to bother him. He realizes that every group seems to want a different version of him. Around one crowd, he's expected to be more outgoing. Around another, he's supposed to be quieter. At work, confidence is rewarded. At home, that same confidence might be mistaken for arrogance. Before long, he notices that he's constantly adjusting himself depending on who is in the room. That realization is unsettling. If everyone likes a different version of you, which one is actually real? This question changes everything. Monk mode becomes less about escaping people and more about removing the pressure to perform. It's the first time in a long time that he doesn't have to impress anyone, entertain anyone, explain himself, or live up to an image that was never truly his. The silence gives him room to strip away the habits, reactions, and masks he picked up just to make life easier around other people. The surprising part is that many people misunderstand this change. They assume he's becoming distant, cold, or antisocial. In reality, he's simply becoming more honest. He's no longer interested in collecting approval by pretending to be someone he's not. When he finally returns from that season of solitude, there's something noticeably different about him. His words become fewer, but more meaningful. His confidence feels quieter, but stronger. His decisions are no longer shaped by what gets applause, but by what feels true. And that's exactly why monk mode becomes one of the most powerful turning points in a Sigma male's life. Number 2, they realize most conversations are negotiations, not connections. One of the quiet discoveries that pushes a Sigma male into monk mode is realizing that not every conversation is as genuine as it seems. As he becomes more observant, he starts noticing patterns that most people overlook. Some people don't start conversations because they care. They start them because they want something. It might be attention, reassurance, influence, advice, access, or simply someone to feed their ego. At first, these moments seem harmless. A compliment is followed by a favor. A friendly message suddenly turns into a request. Someone who never checks on him somehow always appears when they need help. After seeing this happen enough times, he begins to understand that many interactions are less about connection and more about quiet exchanges. That realization changes how he sees the world. He becomes more careful about where he invests his time and energy. He stops feeling guilty for saying no. He no longer believes that being available all the time makes him a good person. Instead, he understands that constant availability often attracts people who value convenience more than character. This doesn't mean he becomes suspicious of everyone. It means he becomes selective. He learns to appreciate the rare people who can spend hours talking without expecting anything in return. Those conversations become priceless because they are built on curiosity, respect, and honesty instead of hidden expectations. Monk mode gives him the distance to separate meaningful relationships from transactional ones. Away from the noise, he can clearly see who reaches out because they genuinely enjoy his company and who only remembers his name when they need something. Number 3, they want to discover who they are without an audience. One of the deepest reasons a Sigma male enters monk mode has nothing to do with other people. It has everything to do with himself. There comes a point when he begins to question whether the life he's living is truly his, or simply a collection of habits shaped by the expectations of everyone around him. The truth is, it's easy to lose yourself when you're constantly being watched. People praise certain qualities, criticize others, and before long, many begin adjusting their personalities to fit what gets the best reaction. They laugh a little louder, speak a little differently, chase goals they never chose, and slowly become strangers to themselves without even realizing it. A Sigma male refuses to let that happen. Monk mode becomes his opportunity to remove the audience completely. Without people constantly giving opinions, advice, approval, or criticism, he finally has the space to ask difficult questions. What do I actually enjoy? What kind of life do I really want? Which dreams belong to me, and which ones have I borrowed from other people? Those questions aren't comfortable, but they are necessary. For the first time in a long while, every decision becomes personal instead of performative. He isn't reading a book because it looks impressive. He's reading it because he's curious. He isn't learning a new skill to gain attention. He's learning because it challenges him. Even the smallest choices begin to reflect his own values instead of someone else's expectations. This process is surprisingly freeing. The pressure to impress disappears, and with it comes a quiet confidence that doesn't depend on compliments or recognition. He no longer needs people to confirm that he's on the right path because he finally understands why he chose that path in the first place. By the time he leaves monk mode, something has fundamentally changed. He isn't returning with a new mask or a carefully crafted image. He's returning with something far more valuable, a clear sense of identity that no crowd can give him and no crowd can take away. That's the kind of confidence that lasts because it's built from within, not borrowed from the applause of others. Number 4, they become addicted to mental silence. One of the most overlooked reasons a Sigma male enters monk mode is that he discovers the incredible power of mental silence. Once he experiences it, he doesn't want to give it up. It's not the silence of an empty room. It's the silence that comes when his mind is no longer being pulled in 10 different directions at the same time. Most people don't realize how noisy life has become. Every day is filled with notifications, opinions, arguments, breaking news, endless scrolling, and people demanding attention. Even when the room is quiet, the mind often isn't. It keeps replaying conversations, worrying about tomorrow, comparing itself to others, or reacting to things that don't truly matter. The Sigma male reaches a point where he simply gets tired of carrying all that noise. Monk mode becomes his way of clearing the mental clutter. He starts limiting distractions, spending less time reacting to every message, and stepping away from environments that constantly compete for his attention. At first, the quiet feels unfamiliar. Then something remarkable happens. His thoughts become clearer. His decisions become sharper. Problems that once felt overwhelming suddenly seem manageable because his mind is no longer buried under constant stimulation. What surprises him most is how much peace improves his judgment. He stops making emotional decisions simply because someone else created urgency. He becomes more patient, more observant, and far less likely to be pulled into unnecessary conflict. Instead of reacting instantly, he begins responding with purpose. People on the outside often misunderstand this change. They assume he's becoming distant because he talks less or spends more time alone. What they don't see is that he's protecting something he fought hard to find. He has learned that peace is not something the world hands to you. It's something you guard. Once a Sigma male discovers what a calm and focused mind feels like, constant chaos loses its appeal. The loudest voices no longer impress him, endless drama no longer entertains him, and distractions no longer feel exciting. Mental silence becomes his greatest advantage because it allows him to hear the one voice that matters most, his own. Number 5. They notice that every new circle wants a different version of them. One of the fastest ways a Sigma male loses interest in social circles is when he realizes that every group has an unwritten script. It doesn't matter where he goes. There is always an invisible expectation about how he should behave, what he should believe, and even what kind of person he should become. The pressure is rarely spoken out loud, but it is always there. In one circle, people expect him to be louder, funnier, and constantly entertaining. In another, they expect him to be ambitious enough to chase status, but humble enough not to outshine anyone. Some friendships only work if he agrees with everyone. Some workplaces reward confidence until that confidence starts making others feel insecure. Everywhere he turns, there seems to be another role waiting for him to play. At first, he tries to adapt. After all, everyone adjusts a little, depending on the situation. But after a while, something feels off. He begins to notice that the more he changes himself to fit in, the less he recognizes the person staring back at him. That realization is impossible to ignore. Monk mode becomes his way of stepping away from every stage where he feels expected to perform. It gives him the freedom to stop asking, "What version of me do they want?" and start asking, "Who am I when nobody expects anything?" That question changes the direction of his life. He begins making choices that reflect his own values instead of the values of the crowd around him. He no longer feels the need to explain every decision or seek permission to live differently. If people misunderstand him, he lets them. If they expect him to fit into a role he has outgrown, he simply walks away without creating unnecessary drama. Number 6. They start measuring life by energy, not time. Most people think the most valuable thing they have is time. A Sigma male eventually discovers something even more important: energy. Two people can have the same 24 hours in a day, yet one ends the day feeling inspired, while the other feels completely drained. That's when he realizes that how he spends his energy matters far more than how he spends his time. This shift changes the way he looks at everything. He begins paying close attention to what leaves him mentally exhausted. Some conversations seem harmless, but leave him carrying someone else's stress for hours. Certain friendships demand constant reassurance without giving anything back. Even habits like endlessly scrolling through social media or arguing with strangers online quietly steal his focus. None of these things take much time on their own, but together they drain the very energy he needs to build the life he wants. That is when monk mode starts to make perfect sense. Instead of asking, "Do I have time for this?" he starts asking, "Is this worth my energy?" The answers surprise him. He says no more often, not because he's selfish, but because he understands that every unnecessary commitment costs him something he can't easily replace. He also becomes protective of his mornings, his focus, and even his emotions. He stops allowing every small inconvenience to ruin his day. He no longer feels obligated to respond to every opinion, solve every problem, or carry burdens that don't belong to him. He learns that protecting his energy is not avoidance, it's wisdom. People who don't understand this change may call him distant or unavailable. They mistake his boundaries for arrogance because they're used to a version of him that was always accessible. But the Sigma male knows something they don't. A tired mind makes poor decisions, and a drained spirit struggles to grow. Number 7. They discover that attention is more dangerous than criticism. Most people spend their lives trying to avoid criticism and attract as much attention as possible. A Sigma male eventually reaches a completely different conclusion. He realizes that criticism can actually make him stronger, but attention has the power to quietly change who he is. Criticism forces him to think. Sometimes it's unfair, sometimes it's completely wrong, and sometimes it reveals a weakness he needs to fix. Either way, it pushes him to examine himself instead of blindly moving forward. Attention, however, plays a far more subtle game. The more people praise him, notice him, or admire what he does, the easier it becomes to crave that feeling again. Without realizing it, he may start making decisions based on what earns applause instead of what aligns with his values. His goals slowly shift. His words become more calculated. Even his achievements begin serving the audience instead of serving his purpose. That realization unsettles him. He understands that chasing approval is one of the easiest ways to lose control of his own life. Once your happiness depends on being noticed, you hand other people the power to influence your choices. The crowd becomes your compass, and the louder they cheer, the harder it becomes to hear your own instincts. Monk mode is his way of breaking that cycle. By stepping away from constant attention, he gives himself the chance to create, improve, and grow without waiting for someone to clap. He learns to enjoy progress that nobody sees and victories that nobody celebrates. Those become the achievements that matter most because they belong entirely to him. Ironically, this makes him more confident than ever. His confidence no longer rises with compliments or falls with criticism. It becomes steady because it is built on private discipline rather than public recognition. Number 8, they become suspicious of their own success. Success is supposed to make life feel complete. That's what most people are taught to believe. Work hard, achieve your goals, earn more money, gain respect, and everything else will fall into place. But a Sigma male eventually reaches a point where he begins to question something very few people ever dare to ask. What if the life he's building isn't actually the life he wants? That question doesn't come from failure, it comes from success. He notices that every milestone is followed by another one. Every achievement creates a new expectation. The finish line keeps moving, and the satisfaction never seems to last as long as he imagined. Instead of feeling fulfilled, he finds himself wondering why he still feels restless despite doing everything he was told would make him happy. That's when monk mode begins. He deliberately steps away from the race, not because he lacks ambition, but because he refuses to spend years climbing a ladder that may be leaning against the wrong wall. He wants to know whether his goals come from his own heart or from a world that constantly tells him what success should look like. During that time alone, he starts examining everything. Is he chasing wealth because it gives him freedom, or because it earns admiration? Is he working for a meaningful purpose, or is he simply afraid of falling behind? Is he building a life that brings peace, or one that only looks impressive from the outside? Those questions are uncomfortable because they don't have quick answers, but they force him to become brutally honest with himself. When he comes out of monk mode, success no longer has the same definition. He stops measuring his life by titles, possessions, or the opinions of others. Instead, he values freedom, peace of mind, meaningful work, and the ability to wake up without feeling trapped by the very life he created. Number 9, they realize convenience is slowly weakening them. A Sigma male eventually notices something that most people never question. The easier life becomes, the less he seems to challenge himself. At first, convenience feels like a reward. Everything is faster, simpler, and more comfortable. Food arrives at the door, entertainment is available every second, and almost every problem has an instant solution. It sounds like progress, but he begins to wonder what all that comfort is quietly taking away. He starts paying attention to his own habits. The less resistance he faces, the easier it becomes to delay difficult tasks. The more comfortable his routine becomes, the less motivated he feels to grow. He realizes that comfort has a strange way of making ordinary feel good enough. It doesn't destroy ambition overnight. It slowly puts it to sleep. That discovery pushes him toward monk mode. He begins removing unnecessary comforts on purpose, not because he enjoys suffering, but because he understands that growth rarely happens in places where everything is easy. He chooses discipline over convenience. He learns skills instead of looking for shortcuts. He tackles difficult projects instead of avoiding them. Every challenge becomes a reminder that strength is built through effort, not ease. The biggest change happens in his mindset. He stops asking, "What's the easiest way?" and starts asking, "What will make me stronger?" Those two questions lead to completely different lives. People around him often don't understand his choices. They wonder why he willingly takes the harder path when easier options exist. What they fail to see is that he's not trying to make life difficult. He's trying to make himself capable. There is a huge difference. Monk mode teaches him that convenience is a wonderful servant, but a terrible master. When comfort begins making decisions for you, your potential slowly fades without you even noticing. By choosing temporary discomfort, the Sigma male protects himself from becoming mentally lazy, emotionally fragile, and overly dependent on an easy life. Number 10, they stop trusting motivation completely. There comes a point when a Sigma male stops waiting to feel like it. He has learned one of the hardest truths about personal growth. Motivation is unpredictable. It shows up when life is exciting, disappears when things get difficult, and often vanishes right when it's needed the most. Depending on it is like depending on good weather. Some days it arrives, but many days it doesn't. At first, he doesn't notice the pattern. Like most people, he starts projects when he's inspired. He works hard when he's excited. He sets big goals after watching an inspiring video or reading a powerful book. But as time passes, the excitement fades, and so does the effort. The unfinished goals begin to pile up, and he realizes the problem isn't a lack of ability. It's relying on a feeling that was never designed to last. That realization changes everything. Monk mode becomes the place where he trains himself to act without waiting for motivation to appear. He creates routines that keep him moving even on days when he feels tired, distracted, or discouraged. He learns that consistency is built during ordinary days, not extraordinary ones. This doesn't mean he suddenly enjoys every task. There are still mornings when he'd rather stay in bed, workouts he'd rather skip, and responsibilities he'd rather avoid. The difference is that his actions are no longer controlled by his mood. He understands that feelings change by the hour, but discipline can remain steady if it's practiced long enough. People often mistake this for having incredible willpower. In reality, it's much simpler. He has stopped negotiating with himself. He no longer wastes energy debating whether he should do what needs to be done. The decision has already been made. That is the hidden purpose of monk mode. It isn't about becoming emotionless. It's about becoming dependable. A Sigma male wants to trust himself, even on his worst days. He knows that anyone can stay committed when life feels easy. The real test is showing up when the excitement is gone. Number 11. They become curious about their untapped limits. One of the most powerful reasons a Sigma male enters monk mode is because he becomes obsessed with one question that refuses to leave his mind. How much more am I capable of? It's not a question driven by ego or competition. It's driven by curiosity. He starts wondering what would happen if he stopped settling for the version of himself that has become comfortable. Most people never ask this question because comfort gives the illusion that they've already reached their potential. They become good enough at their job, good enough in their relationships, and good enough in life. The problem is that good enough has ended more dreams than failure ever has. A Sigma male sees that trap and refuses to stay in it. Monk mode becomes a personal experiment. He strips away distractions, unnecessary habits, and constant entertainment to see what remains. He wants to know how disciplined he can become when nobody is watching. He wants to discover how much he can learn when he stops wasting hours on things that add no value. He wants to find out how resilient he really is when excuses are no longer an option. What makes this journey different is that he isn't trying to prove himself to anyone else. There are no trophies to win, no audience to impress, and no competition to beat. The only person he's challenging is the man he was yesterday. That mindset changes everything. Every difficult workout, every new skill, every uncomfortable decision becomes evidence that his limits were never as fixed as he once believed. He begins to understand that most barriers aren't physical, they're mental. They're built from doubt, fear, routine, and years of believing that this is simply who I am. Monk mode gives him the freedom to question those invisible limits instead of accepting them. Number 12. They reach the point where growth feels more exciting than validation. There is a moment in every Sigma male's journey when something quietly changes inside him. The compliments that once felt rewarding no longer carry the same weight. The approval he used to notice becomes little more than background noise. It's not because he has become arrogant or indifferent. It's because he has discovered something far more satisfying than being admired, becoming better. Most people spend years chasing recognition. They want others to notice their success, praise their efforts, or confirm that they're on the right path. While there is nothing wrong with appreciation, it becomes dangerous when it turns into the reason you keep moving. The moment your progress depends on someone else's approval, your direction is no longer fully your own. A Sigma male eventually sees this for what it is. That's when monk mode stops being a temporary escape and becomes a powerful turning point. He begins focusing on improvements that nobody applauds. He reads books no one knows he's reading. He learns skills that won't be posted online. He fixes habits that only he can see. He spends hours becoming stronger in ways that never earn likes, compliments, or public recognition. Ironically, those invisible victories become the ones he values the most. He starts enjoying the process more than the outcome. Every lesson learned, every weakness corrected, and every bad habit broken becomes its own reward. He no longer needs an audience to feel accomplished, because the evidence of his progress is reflected in his character, his discipline, and the quiet confidence with which he carries himself. People often wonder why he seems so calm, even when nobody is paying attention to him. The answer is simple. His motivation no longer comes from being noticed. It comes from knowing that today's version of himself is stronger, wiser, and more disciplined than yesterday's. Monk mode isn't about disappearing from the world. It's about disappearing long enough to stop living on autopilot. It's the decision to step away from distractions, expectations, and endless noise so you can reconnect with the person you've been too busy to become. While others mistake silence for weakness, a Sigma male understands that some of life's greatest transformations happen behind closed doors, where no one is watching and no one is applauding. The truth is, monk mode isn't reserved for a select few. It's a choice anyone can make when they realize that growth demands sacrifice. Sometimes that sacrifice is comfort. Sometimes it's approval. And sometimes it's the courage to walk alone until your purpose becomes clearer than the opinions surrounding you. If there's one lesson to take away from this video, it's this. The strongest version of yourself will never be built by constantly seeking validation from the outside. It is built through discipline, self-reflection, and the willingness to face yourself with complete honesty. That's where real confidence begins. And that's where lasting change is born. If you enjoyed this video and found value in these insights, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss future videos designed to challenge your thinking, sharpen your mindset, and help you become the strongest version of yourself. And before you go, leave a comment below and tell us which reason for monk mode resonated with you the most. And have you ever experienced a season of stepping away to rebuild yourself? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, stay focused, stay disciplined, and never stop growing.